The Silver Case isn't just your ordinary visual novel. It's also an oddly prophetic postmodern analysis of the dawn of digital society, yet it's somehow still firmly grounded by its turn-of-the-century roots. Unlike the tagline, it doesn't kill the past, it embraces it. This game stands as Grasshopper Manufacturer's debut game, a game that would soon establish this tiny team of five's legacy as the most bizarre set of storytellers in the gaming industry today. So, some brief history on the game. SUDA51 worked at Human Entertainment, you know, the guys behind the Clock Tower series. While he was there, he worked on the Syndrome series of visual novels, which if you play Danganronpa 2, there's an entire level that pays homage to the Twilight Syndrome, but I digress. Now, the Moonlight Syndrome is the first game in the Moon or the Kill the Past series, with the Silver Case being the second and Flower, Sun, and Rain being the third. I think Killer 7 and Killer is Dead might fall into this series somewhere, since they both carry over similar motifs, such as the progression of the moon and the title cards to each mission, but after playing through most of SUDA's work personally, I still can't tell you how they all relate. Now, if you want to know more about the history of Grasshopper and SUDA51's influences, I highly recommend you watch Toco TV's special on SUDA51. It does a great job of setting up the history of the Silver Case. I'll leave a link in the description below. The Silver Case was given the HD treatment from its 1999 iteration, but SUDA51, the game's creative director and writer, went to great lengths to preserve the story and maintain themes present within. You even have the option of switching over to the original soundtrack and graphics of the PlayStation version, if that's your sort of thing. So let's get this straight. I can't go too far into the story without spoiling anything, and that's pretty much the crux of this game. And a visual novel is only as strong as its story, or in some cases, only as strong as the 2D women harem it contains. The Silver Case excels enough in its narrative that the absence of mermaid women isn't felt, mostly. The best way I can summarize the plot without spoiling is by saying that the Silver Case is a neo-noir detective drama that contains a strange wraparound story that has less to do with catching an infamous murderer and has more to do with the beginnings of society evolving with technology, and it evolves into some sort of manufactured dystopia of its own complacent design. The basic synopsis on the box is that it's about an infamous killer named Kamui Uehara returning after a 20-year absence. 20 years ago, he killed a group of politicians and became a legend in the 24 wards, which is where this game takes place. Kamui's killings were known as the Silver Case, and the story centers around what truly happened 20 years ago and how the legend of Kamui is manifesting into something bigger than just one deranged individual. The Silver Case takes place in the late 90s during an era where the analog world was quickly being overtaken by the digital revolution. As expected, the game is a hyper-stylized yet raw abstraction of humanity that is not dissimilar from a Philip K. Dick novel in its prophetic statements delivered by its unapologetic narrative that delves deeply into the themes of instantaneous information exchange, the death of print media and ethical journalism, society's collective short-term empathy for tragic events, the decay of privacy, symbolic gestures representing power, and the dilution of truth through manufactured stories of real events. You know, the shit that happens in the present day in a nutshell. This is a thinking man's visual novel, which is why I respect Grasshopper's decision not to modernize by inserting memes or by censoring any of the language or slurs thrown around. It pulls absolutely no punches when it comes to some of the dialogue in the game, which should honestly be expected from a SUDA51 game by this point.
Downward fucking dog!
Let's cut to the chase. My first experience with the silver case came in the form of the demo released on Steam. Before, the only stuff I knew about this game is it was well beloved in Japan, it was tangentially connected to Flowers, Sun, and Rain, and somewhat Killer 7, and that's about it. Many people were excited for the remaster of this game, and there was a ringing endorsement from Deadly Premonition creator and my main man, Swery. So you know I'm about to pick it up. Side note, when will Swery and SUDA finally hook up and create the best love baby game the world has ever seen? Anyways, Limited Run Games picked up the game for publishing the physical PC release, and with any luck my physical copy will arrive by December, so I'll update you then. So while I was waiting for my Steam key to be mailed to me, I downloaded the demo to get a taste of what to expect, and I'm being completely honest here when I say I hated the demo. And let me explain why. So the demo was comprised of most of Case 0, which is the opening act of the silver case. And I have to say that Case 0 is the weakest out of all the acts in the game. This little vertical slice of the game does not do the rest of the game justice in any sense of the word. Okay, so let's talk about it. You play as a nameless main character. So in this case, let's just call him Hikiko. Hikiko is a member of a special task force, think a SWAT team, that's sent into an abandoned factory in response to a murderer on the loose. Here, your team and you go over the basics in gameplay, which basically involves turning a dial of actions on the right-hand corner of the screen and moving around on rails to interact with star markers on the screen. You never once see any of the main characters on the field of the game. All interactions are handled through this pop-up window interface, so when you're trying to talk to someone, you have to turn to the dial C and then click on the guy or object you want to interact with. I just feel like this little thing could have been streamlined in the HD remaster, but I guess they wanted to preserve the old style of gameplay. I know this concession in gameplay was made due to budgetary restrictions in the 90s, but I would have liked it if I could move freely from marker to marker without having to turn the dial each time. It's a bit tedious to swap through menus each and every time you want to move around the room, and you're going to be doing this a lot. This is the bulk of the gameplay here. In all fairness, you are warned by Natsume, your team member, that the controls are a little hard to get used to, but they do get better over time. I have a feeling that the controls, more than anything else, will scare away a lot of players. Even though I'm a fan of low-budget games and I can get used to awkward controls, even I had some trouble with the first map in the game. For instance, I had no clue that I could go through certain doors because they weren't marked with a star first. So I was embarrassingly stuck on the first map for a long period of time until I pressed forward on this door. Now I know that seems obvious, but the game goes out of its way to emphasize these little star markers. Anyways, you're in the Cauliflower Tower and you have to get to the top to stop this murderer and look for survivors. But along the way, there are some puzzles that require some super hacking abilities where you have to decipher these codes on these panels. Oh wait, no you don't. You can either choose to crack these passcodes on your own or click the magnifying glass to bypass the puzzles entirely. And that only affects the Steam achievements if you care about that sort of thing. Even though the magnifying glass is kind of a casualized decision, I think it was a good one to include just in case you only care about the story of the game. It's up to you if you want to live the rest of your life as a cheater. Again with this demo, just when I was getting the ball rolling and hacking my way past the door that leads up to the killer, the demo ended. It was at this point I immediately reverted into skepticism. This is it? This seems like a SWAT team simulator with really awkward controls. I didn't really know if I'd be able to do this for the rest of the game. And about a couple days later when I was sent the Steam key and I tried the game out for myself, I was shocked to find out that the demo ended right before shit starts to get good. Really good. So my advice to you guys out there trying the demo or trying the game, you gotta push past that beginning hour slump before the game starts to get good. I'm glad I pushed past it because what awaited me was a mind-bending avant-garde showcase that could only come from the mind of Grasshopper Manufacturer. Shortly after the demo ends, you're introduced to the best character in the game, the foul-mouthed Beat Takeshi lookalike Tetsu Kusabi. He's a veteran of the HCU, or Heinous Crimes Unit division. You can't help but love this guy. He's crass, brutal, and he delivers some of the best one-liners in the entire game. Internet? Fuck the internet. It was at this point that the game sunk its hooks into me, and I was along for one wild ride. Please, I reiterate this, if you play the demo, understand that the game gets so good right after it ends. What were they thinking? So after you play through the first case in the transmission line, you unlock the Placebo set of missions, where you play as another character, freelance reporter Tokyo Morishima. His story is more tonally and gameplay-wise a more grounded scenario to play through. The Placebo scenario runs concurrent with the transmission scenario, so in order to play the full game in chronological order, you should play a transmission case, then follow it up with the Placebo report. Trust me, it will help alleviate some of the more confusing aspects of the story later on. I want to make mention that the transmission cases were written by a young SUDA-51, so they get very experimental and take artistic liberties in the design, as expected. There's more movement and exploration in the cases, and they provide you with the crux of the main events. On the flip side, the Placebo reports were written by Masahide Uka and Sako Kato respectively. In the Placebo missions, you hang out in Tokyo's apartment, answer emails, talk to his cute turtle Red, so cute, and some of the more funnier scenes come from when you get shit on in the chat rooms. You're basically locked into a cubicle during the Placebo missions, and that's Tokyo's apartment, but you're gonna find yourself growing attached to it as time goes on. Even though Tokyo's story is only supplemental to the overall plot and acts to fill in the giant what the fuck holes left in SUDA's wake, I found Tokyo's story to be a tad more endearing and engaging. The writers took something as mundane as answering emails and made them really fun. I truly looked forward to reading the inspirational quotes that you get, or the occasional virus that Tokyo would download by accident. And there's also a little debriefing of Tokyo's thoughts and his little memos that he writes, just kind of like Captain Olimar in Pikmin. Tokyo's side of the story is more about a man with a forgotten past going through an existential crisis. With the help of an old flame and a flaming bartender, he comes to know his place in the world, and damn, I really wanted to spend more time hanging with Tokyo and Red. And at the end of it all, I wish the transmission scenarios could reflect the pacing and streamlined approach that Tokyo's side has. Okay, so let's talk about the SUDA side of the Silver Case. His story is about the main character and the HCU trying to track down the killer Kamui. The main character seems more like a passive observer in most of the story, as this is primarily an ensemble tale, with the main character's main responsibilities to solve puzzles as you go along. One thing I can't get over is how Tetsu refers to the main character as Big Dick. Or occasionally as that chinchilla-looking motherfucker. It's just outstanding. A great majority of the stories are carried by these little illustrated vignettes or the occasional low bitrate video clip. The artwork in this game might remind you of the dark watercolors found in a Shin Megami equivalent, and I think the grittier, more realistic character portraits were a better choice than some of the sterile anime shit you would find in a similar visual novel. And the soundtrack by Masafumitakada of Danganronpa fame contains many drum, bass, and synth tracks that remind me of Parasite Eve's OST, or or a Jackie Chan crime drama, which is a good thing in my book. Akira Yamaoka of Silent Hill composition fame also remixed this soundtrack, so you have the option of listening to his awesome composition or the old stuff. Both are very wonderful. I have to admit, the times where SUDA backs away from the Tarantino screenplay writing and lets his characters have some time to develop are quite refreshing and some of the best moments this game has to offer. The Spectrum chapter is the only time where the story takes a more serious tone and has a couple of heartwarming moments that are spun into a tale of tragedy. Every chapter in SUDA's side has its own tone and graphical style present. He never once lets up on the crazy, and you never quite can predict where this story is going to end up. The Silver Case is almost perfect, but it's clear it was hampered by a small budget, and this fact is especially felt in Chapter 5, where assets are recycled ad nauseum as you're roaming through 10 carbon copy towers trying to find clues to progress the story. Guys, I'm a fan of low-budget games, and I'm of the opinion that the story benefited from the lower budget, as it's clear that the writers didn't compromise one bit in the narrative. But if I'm being completely honest here, the gameplay does suffer from having to swap between menus and movement, and tilting the camera up and down to find contextual boxes, and all of these recycled areas throughout the various chapters. And if you want to be real, the entire Placebo side of the story, which happened to be my favorite, it's one giant recycled area over and over again. I'm not saying it was lazy, I'm just saying that it's clear they ran out of budget before they could do something great with this. Even with the awkward movement and recycled areas, I would still recommend this visual novel to the type of gamer that can look past surface level flaws to find the deeper beauty within this game. Hell, if you've ever enjoyed any of SUDA's games, then this is par for the course. You're already used to doing that anyway. And besides, there's definitely too many great little moments to pass up in this one, so go out and buy it. Also, purchasing a copy of the Silver Case is supporting the preservation and localization community that brings old gems like this out to the West. SUDA has shown some interest in a Killer 7 remaster, so keep that in the back of your noggin. Come on, guys. Don't do this to SUDA. You already made him sit alone with a pyramid of No More Heroes toilet paper. You think he's forgotten that shit by now? He totally hasn't. You know what he has forgotten about? His son. Confirmed, SUDA 51 is my dad.